This week I'm interviewing Justin Manley from Titanium Talks. Now, you will find the first few minutes of this interview pretty intense. Justin explains a near-death accident that happened on a site he was working on, and goes into quite a lot of detail with it. So it's really worth sticking around, especially if you're in that stage of your business where you're kind of trying to create a culture of health and safety, compliance in your business, or if it's something that is nagging at you that you really need to do. I will add that if you are affected by anything that's mentioned in this podcast and you need some help with it, check out the Lighthouse Club Construction Charity. It's a great organization for anybody in the construction space that wants to talk about mental health. So we'll put the link in the descriptions. Enjoy. So we obviously got introduced, Justin, through the Lighthouse Club and the work that you're doing with mental health, but you also talk on a lot of different subjects.
Yeah.
When I first came across your actually, it was actually the name of your company, and most guys, especially in construction, you kind of pick a cool name because it just sounds cool.
Yeah.
Your company's called Titanium Talks, and
Yeah.
I'd love for you to just explain to the listener why your company is called Titanium Talks, because I think that speaks a lot, and it actually introduces listeners to who you are.
Yeah, you're right. I had to come up with the name of the company that landed, but I wanted a name of a company that actually meant something. And a lot of people ask me, why Titanium Talks? Why would you call it Titanium Talks? And it all stems back from 2015, when I was actually involved in a near fatal work accident on site. My background's utilities. I've worked in utilities for nearly 20 years now. And in 2015, I went to work today to repair a high pressure water main. There's a lot of other factors involved in that day. The main had been off for a long time. And when you work for the water industry, you can't have water mains shut off for too long because companies start paying compensation. There was a massive time factor involved in it. My birthday, so the accident happened on the 28th of October, 2015, and my birthday was the 27th of October. So I was supposed to be doing this job, swing past, get it done, and then I was supposed to be traveling down to London that evening to see my family and celebrate my birthday. Got to site. Any other day, it was a normal job. It was all dug out for me. It was quite an easy job. And for whatever reason, and I don't know why to this day, I did this. I repaired the main the first time, absolutely fine. When the main got charged up, there was a small leak on the water main, and I decided to jump into this excavation without any PPE on this day, or this time, I should say. And I'm not going to lie to people. I've jumped into excavations before without PPE on, and it's always gone right, over the career that I had, the long career. I've never had an accident, never, got hurt or anything. And some days I'd wear PPE and some days I didn't. So I jumped into the hole and tried to repair the water main, and it failed. The clamp that I was working on failed under pressure, and a massive explosion happened, water and air explosion. And at the time of the explosion, I had a torque wrench that was in my hand, and that was then catapulted straight into my face at 80 miles an hour and completely shattered my whole entire face and skull. It was actually my labourer who actually found me floating in the hole. He managed to pull me out. He was 19 years old at the time. He'd only been with me for a year and a half, my young labourer. So I was technically basically teaching him and training him what not to do sort of thing on site. I was rushed to hospital straight from site. I wasn't given long, really, to be fair. My injuries were quite bad. They had to sedate me for nearly 28 hours to keep me comfortable in the first hospital to be transferred to another hospital. Basically, the first hospital I went to, because my whole face was shattered and my eye was like severed and all this sort of stuff, they weren't really equipped for that injury. So I was taken then to another hospital, which is in Oxford, which is called the John Radcliffe. I had to go straight into theatre, went straight in for an operation. Took about 5 hours. Unfortunately, I'm blind in my right eye. They couldn't save my vision. My optic nerve was severed by the explosion, but they had to try and reconstruct my whole entire eye socket because my whole eye was shattered. And it wasn't until after the first surgery, it came back, obviously battered and bruised. And it wasn't until a couple of hours later that I was given the news that I only had a couple of years to basically live. They'd done some further tests and x-rays, and one of the X-rays had shown that when my whole face was shattered, my eye socket had split in two, basically. So the bone here had split in two, and a bit of the bone had come away and got lodged into my membrane sac of my brain, and it tore that membrane sac. Basically, everyone's got fluid in their head called CFS fluid. It fights off like meningitis and infections. The brain fluid was leaking through the cracks of my skull, and it was dripping out my nose. Like I said, they said a couple of years, to live, or you can have an operation, he said, but the operation carries an 85% fatality rate. He said the only way to repair this injury is to cut you from one ear, cut you up the side of your head, cut you across the top, cut you back down the other side, take your face down, take your skull completely apart, try and get the bit of bone out of your membrane and stitch it back up. He said chances are a lot of people don't survive this operation. He said, so it's your choice. Do you want to live for a couple of years or take an operation that could potentially kill you then and there? And this is only my personal opinion. I can't speak for everybody. What they would choose to do is up to them. I couldn't live knowing I think I was going to die. I think waking up every day, looking at the calendar, thinking that's one day down, or will I be here at Christmas? Will I be here for my birthday? Will I see this or see that? And I don't think mentally I could handle that. I don't think I could do it. So I opted to go for the operation. And they basically gave me a grace period to go home and say goodbye to my family. I'm married. My kids were quite young at the time. My daughter Betty was 3, Harry was 10, and Tyler was about 12. And I basically had to sit down and say goodbye to my kids that night individually. I spent about half hour with each, 25 minutes with each kid, and literally had to say my goodbyes. And then the next day I went in for the operation, which I survived it somehow. It took about 15 and a half hours. They cut me from one side, went up the side of my head, across the top, down the other side, took the face down, got a bit of bone out of my brain. They put 8 stitches into my membrane. I now have about 49 plates, 36 screws in my head. There's 2 bolts that drill into the top of my skull, into my cheekbone, 2 little pins that drive up to my cheekbone, into my skull. 16 plates with 14 screws that tie my forehead together. My nose is made out of titanium. My eye sockets are all titanium, and bits of my cheekbones out of titanium. 197 internal stitches, 246 external stitches. Face is permanently numb. Got no nerves left in my face now, so I don't feel any of my face anymore. And I was left not being able to walk and talk straight after the accident, which meant I had to have 24-hour care. I had to have someone bath me, feed me, clothe me, wipe my bum, which makes you feel about that big when your wife has to wipe your bum. And that's how I came up with the name Titanium Talks, because after the accident, I didn't do it straight away. I didn't go out talk. I was too hard to talk about the accident. It was too painful to talk about it and process it. But 4 years ago, I decided that a lot of people have asked me to go and share my story because they feel the learnings, not just the accident, but the learnings from the accident, they reckon could really help people and make a difference. So I came up with a name. And I thought, my whole face is made out of titanium. Why not call my company Titanium Talks? And that's how we started the company 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I imagine you've said that story many, many times, and
Yep.
And I hope you don't mind us asking kind of more questions around it. But even I think for myself, like, I'm known for interrupting my guests and saying something. I was kind of speechless there. I couldn't kind of. Yeah, it's a bit painful just to listen to.
It is, and that's it in a nutshell as well. There's a lot that went with it, a lot more. And when I do my big events, I do go into detail. I go into the morning of the accident, and I go through the whole day, and I just try and pick apart things that I remember. Because some of it I don't remember. But I always say to people, ask me whatever questions you want, because for me, you can't lie. You can't. If I lie about it, then what do you learn? What do you get out of it? Oh, we had an accident, but then what about it? So I held my hand up straight away. I was honest from the moment the investigation started, the moment the HSE got involved. I held my hand up straight away, and I said I didn't quite follow the risk assessment to the dot. I didn't wear my PPE, and I held my hand up. I didn't wear my hard hat. I didn't wear my goggles. I admitted that straight away, because I knew if I tried to skate around it, we're not going to learn anything if I'm not honest. And I learned a lot about the accident. There's quite a lot that I learned from it.
Can I ask with the PPE side of things, because judging, and I don't know if this assessment has been made, but judging from like the speed of that tool hitting your face,
yeah,
would a pair of safety goggles or any other PPE have actually made a difference there? Or
No.
is that just more
So
of a liability type of thing?
one of the things that we looked at was the PPE. What impact would that have had? Would it have helped? Would it have not helped? And no. The answer is, if I was wearing the goggles that I would have normally wore for that repair, they would not have held an 80-mile-an-hour impact to the face. If anything, so this is my real eye. It was hanging on by the muscle, basically. So even though the optic nerve was severed, the muscle's intact. So it will move. I can look around and it moves up and
Hmm.
down. It just doesn't work. If I had glasses on, chances are I would have had to have removed my eye because it would have had shards of glass or plastic lodged into it. Um, but then there's so many other factors because the explosion was so quick. The HSE have got a timeline basically of when it happened. And if I'd have gone, I need to retighten my bolts, the bolts up in the hole. If I'd have walked down to where the van was to go and get my PPE on, they believe I might not have been in the hole when the explosion happened. So going to get my PPE on in the time frame that there was could have had an impact on me being in the hole
Hmm.
when the explosion happened. So going to get the PPE on could have had a major impact on me not even being in the hole. So it was a tale of two, really. It was, in this instant, it wouldn't. But if I'd gone to go and get them on, it might have done. And that's the beauty about the HSE. They'll look into everything. They will leave no stone unturned, and they'll take their time, and they will come up with things that you never even thought of. They've got things in front of you that they ask you, and you've got to have answers for it all. You've got to be like, did you do this? No. Or what about this? Oh, I didn't do that one. And it's just simple little things that you forget when you're on site sometimes, but you think until someone's asked that question, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that?
Yeah.
And it's
And
not just me.
how
Yeah,
was that process of um not just dealing with the HSE, but the entire kind of like legal administration like aspect of post accident? Because
yeah,
I think from my experience as an owner of a construction company, what you're saying is literally like worst nightmare kind of
yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And I'm just curious, like how it was for you, your family, like
yeah,
because I can imagine it's like constantly bringing up the same thing, replaying
yeah,
it from different angles. What kind of toll did that take on you and the other people involved in the incident, like
yeah,
this 19-year-old labourer,
yeah.
for
So
example?
do you know what? The physical injury was horrendous. I was in a lot of pain for a long, long, long time. But like you said, it was the mental stuff that came afterwards that I didn't prepare myself for. I'd never been through anything like this before in my life. So for me, I was so unprepared on how just people's words have a huge effect on you. Someone saying he didn't do this, he didn't do that. Um, had anybody ever seen him work unsafe before? And people say, "Oh, I've been on sites before with Justin, and this has happened." And people's talk, and you think, "God, am I that unsafe? Am I that reckless? Am I that?" But I'm not. I just made a mistake. Now, because we put a civil sort of case in, we don't try to make them out to be the most reckless company in the world, and they don't try to make me out to be the most reckless person in the world. But what happens is there's a game. It's a vicious game that gets played. They've got to protect their money, and I want money. Um, so you have to play this game. But after 4 years, it takes its toll on me, my wife, because I was coming home from days where I was speaking to the solicitor, and I was angry, and my wife would be there, my kids would be there, and I'd be angry. I'd take it out on them because I was frustrated. I maybe didn't get an email I wanted to hear, or maybe I had to read a bit of a statement I didn't want to read, or I read it but didn't like it, and it really hurt me. And I would go back, and then I would vent my frustration on the family. I'd snap at the wife, I'd snap at the kids, and I was trying to deal with it all, trying to keep it together, because I didn't want to break down. And there were days I broke down. There were days my wife said I'd cry. I'd go to a solicitor's meeting and I'd come back and I'd feel absolutely gutted about what I did or what I didn't do or what I should have done and what I shouldn't have do. And I just felt guilty because again, a lot of it was some of it was a little bit me part to blame. And it was the guilt going, I done it. I did this. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was silly. I knew it was a little bit unsafe, but I chose to do it anyway. And it was just that mental thing that I'd put my family through that. And it could have easily been avoided if I would have just not. The explosion was always going to happen. They figured out the explosion was going to happen no matter what. But again, because there were little errors on my part as well,
Yeah.
It was just that guilt, I think, of putting my family through that, and the 4 years of it. You believe it after a while. You believe what people say about you and what is, and stuff, and it hurts. But I've learned to let it go a little bit now.
And have you, I guess, because in some senses you still replay it now, but
Yeah,
in a different lens, more from talking to people rather
yeah,
than from like a litigation
yeah.
perspective. Does that still bring up, like, do you feel like you're maybe at peace with it a little bit more, or is it like now a different angle, a different level that you're kind of dealing
I feel
with
doing the
things?
job that I do now has helped me massively. Man, I had a lot of therapy after the accident. So did the family. My wife had therapy. My kids had therapy. We had to have a lot. Even my young apprentice. We had to go and speak to someone about it. It was quite a horrific, horrendous night. And while I was at work, I couldn't let go. I couldn't. I went back to work. I became a supervisor or a manager, whatever you want to call it. But I just couldn't let it go because I was still working in that environment. But the moment
Yeah.
I got diagnosed with PTSD 3 years after the accident, I had a breakdown at work. I just couldn't cope anymore. Um, and then I started doing this, talking about it. I only went out one day to just have a chat with the company who asked me to come and talk about it. But the moment I left, I was like, feel like I've turned something around that was something so horrific. So doing even a podcast like this, being able to talk about my accident, knowing that there may be someone listening who goes, "Oh, I could learn a lot from what Justin done, or some of the errors that he's admitted that he's done." We see it, we move. So I think when people leave a session and they turn around and say to me, I'm going to think twice now about my family, about next time I do something silly, that gives me this huge sort of positive. I'm doing something right now, and doing my job now is my new therapy. Being able to talk
Yeah.
about it and open up helps me deal with it.
One of the things that I want to go into today is this idea of kind of site culture and
Yeah,
site interpretation of, like, when management or when an owner of a company is trying to implement health and safety. Because I
yeah,
think particularly with myself, running like small to medium company, you're very kind of involved and very linked,
yeah,
and there's levels of like banter with the guys on site, and then
yeah,
sometimes, saying, kind of almost policing that, oh no, you need to do that,
yeah,
can
yeah,
can have some conflict. And
yeah,
it's almost like in your social circles as
yeah,
well, right? It's clashing.
yeah,
And I know you mentioned as well when we spoke before that you were sort of guilty on the other part of, like, maybe, giving a bit of banter about health and
yeah,
safety and stuff.
yeah,
And now that you speak so much to, all levels of
yeah,
of
yeah.
of people in the industry, what would you say to perhaps a construction company owner or a manager that is sort of struggling with that, um, like, embedding the culture of health
Yeah.
and safety, and perhaps especially, I think, so typically in a journey of like growing your
Yeah,
business with construction, you start off just, you don't care about health and safety, you just
yeah,
like
yeah,
building, 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 and then either your client starts pushing you or you realize you're massively at risk,
yeah,
and then you've got to embed it, and then
yeah,
suddenly it's like, last month we didn't give a shit, and then now suddenly we've got to wear hats and goggles and all of
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And it's that transition that I've found is really hard, and I wonder
yeah,
whether you've got any. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm
yeah,
getting at? Any suggestions or advice around that?
yeah. So my advice, and this is one of the biggest things that's talked about at the moment, the last couple of years, this psychological safety, is a huge thing within construction and any company, any organization. Psychological safety is a big thing. People feel needing to feel empowered to be able to speak up and not live in fear of, am I going to get persecuted for saying I can't do this job? Am I going to get ridiculed? Am I going to get blamed for just trying to get out of a job? Or am I going to get blamed for this? So for years, the culture's been, if someone's stopping a job for a safety reason or whatever reason it may be, it's simply because they just didn't want to do it. That then got tarnished with everybody who now stops a job. Oh, you're just trying to get out of it. So psychological
Mhm.
safety is now trying to come back round away from that and and embed the fact that everybody has the right to stop something if it's not right, And for company owners and directors, that has to be driven from the top down. Even though you're a long way away sometimes from the action, your choices and your actions speak massive volumes to the people on the ground. Because if you've got a weak link in safety, it doesn't work. Your team and your organization has to be all or nothing. Okay. And it has to be driven from that top down. That safety is paramount. And we all have these visions, we have values, we have these beliefs, some of it do it for fluffy marketing. Our values of the company are safety, integrity, all these sorts of things. But do you stand by that? Do you stand by what you said that your values of your organization are, or is it for your marketing? Is it for your banners that you put up to say that all this sort of stuff? And people believe a lot of the stuff. People are great people readers. People can read people and they'll know if it's just something you're saying or do you actually believe? Now, what I try to talk about in some of the sessions is managers and supervisors or even higher level have a huge impact in creating a culture for their company. And I always ask a question to most managers and leaders when they talk about, can we embed safety and can we change this culture? And I'll say to you, have you got a go-to team? So I'll take a manager in the room if I'm doing a session and I'll say, have you got a go-to team? 9 times out of 10, what do you reckon most people say to me? Yeah, I've got a go-to team. And I'll say, what? Because they're the safest? And they'll go, no. I said, why? He goes, because they'll get the job done. That's what you've created. You've created this team to their ego now believes that the reason you're ringing them to get it done because you want the job done. And it's not because they're the safest team. It's because they'll do it. You'll know they'll go out there and get that job done. And that is an ego that a manager or supervisor, and I'm only generalizing, I'm not talking, I can only generalize into companies that I've seen and experienced is because I was a go-to team. I was a team that was relied on by my managers and supervisors to get the job done. Not because I was safe. I was quick. I was efficient, you see. But that is something that managers and supervisors have helped create in our industry is when you have a go-to team, you're feeding into their egos that they can cut corners, that they can do this. They'll just get the job done. They get it done quicker. So my advice to them is just be careful when you label a team an amazing team, Don't lure them into a false sense of security that the reason they're the best team on the contract is because they're the safest. It could be the fact that they're unsafe and they cut corners to get the job done to please you, basically. So that would be my bit of advice. Is just be careful when feeding these egos.
I see that a lot, especially when you're in London. You see all these lorries on hoardings saying safety first. Like everything's about safety, and it kind of goes. You kind of don't really believe it.
Right.
Have you got any personal experience of being engaged in all these companies of seeing that? I guess examples of where leadership have actually demonstrated in a way, not that it looks like to other shareholders, to the public, but actually to their operatives that, okay, this company genuinely cares about my safety, my welfare. Can you think of any times that you've seen that you feel that actually worked well?
You mentioned a word earlier, a minute ago, and it really struck with me when you said the word policing, about how a lot of companies do police. And you see that all the time. Okay, you see a company say, right, this is our value, this is our vision, but they police it. This is what I want you to do. This is what you need to do. This is what you have to do to create our mission to get to, the safest company, whatever. And my advice and my little tip for company is to get away from this policing method of I'm a manager, I'm a director, I'm a CEO. I now have to tell people what to do, and you can give a manager's title to anybody. I can make anybody a manager and say you're now a manager, but not everybody can be leaders, you see. And to be a leader, you need to have followers. And to be able to create followers, you've got to be a coach. That is the culture that I now believe that companies need to adapt to achieve that, is a coaching culture. Being able to sit on your hands and not say anything, or sometimes just asking the right questions. If you want to create a company that is high performing, well, then you need to just sit on your hands and say to the team or the gangs or whoever's doing the job, how would you do this? What would you do? Because what happens is, instead of you telling them what to do, they've now come up with a part of the answer, haven't they? Now, the effort, the safetiness that they'll put into doing that job, it being their idea, will be a lot more effort And safer if you say to them, this is how you're going to do it, and this is what you're going to do. And all you've done is just give them a bit of self-esteem that they're a part of the cause. He's come to me and asked me, how would I do this? How would you come with that? Because they've got to come up with the answer because they're the experts. What people forget is the ones on the ground are the experts doing that job. They've got the answers. They know how to do it. What we need to do now as leaders, managers, owners of companies is just let go a little bit. Let go and let them come up with some answers and let them come up with some. Sometimes you'll think, no, that's not no, we're not going to do it that way. I still think it's better this way. That's fine. You might go, didn't see that one or didn't think of that one. That's a great idea, So it's just try to let go a little bit if you're an owner of a company or a manager or a director, and just start to create a coaching culture, because you start to build people's self-esteem by doing that. And self-esteem is the bedrock to human performance. You want people to perform, well, then make them feel good about themselves. And that's how simple it is.
You kind of, I really feel like what you're saying there is just about empowering the guys to make the decisions. And I liked what you said there about kind of sitting on your hands and just listening to what they're saying and let them come up with a solution. Because I actually found when I was growing my business, that was a big shift, not from a safety point of view, but from a building good jobs point of view. I used to go in there and say, no, we've got to do it this, the drawing says this, we've got to do this. But then actually when you start acknowledging, you guys you've done this for 10 years. You tell me, if you were in my shoes, how would we build it? How would we solve this problem if it had to be solved? And suddenly you get a whole heap of answers that you never got before when you were coming in saying, no, this is how it's got to be done. I know you told me you're studying, is it a master's in behavioral psychology?
Psychology. Yeah.
I'm interested to understand why you're doing that, firstly, how it links with Titanium Talks, because I imagine it does, and so far what you're potentially learning that you think could, there are any bits that you've learned from your studies that you think could be integrated into, communication, training, getting people on board, anything like that you can share with us?
Yeah, so part of the main reason I'd say is why I got into psychology and behavioural safety is basically because I wanted to understand me. I wanted to understand why I did what I did. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was silly. I knew it was unsafe. And I wanted to understand why. What drives people's behaviour every day to do things that they know are unsafe and wrong? So I thought I'm gonna venture into psychology, which I think I bit off a little bit more than I can chew at the moment. I mean, I've done holes for nearly 20 years now. To do this, it's completely like a fish out of water. When I have to write some of these the essays and cite all the stuff that I'm doing, I'm like, oh, what have I done? But I go down these rabbit holes and find it fascinating, because ultimately, when you look at psychology, which there's hundreds of models and things and ideas, and that psychology is ideas of what makes human beings tick and stuff like that. When I go down these rabbit holes now, and I've learned, if this podcast was 10 hours, we'd be able to go through it all sort of thing, but it's just simple little things that are obvious that you never even think about. You look at things like, if you ever driven from A to B and you don't remember that drive, now it sounds unsafe to be in control of a vehicle and drive on a motorway and get there and go, I don't remember any of that drive. I don't remember passing an accident. I don't remember passing, or you get to your junction and you look up and you're there and you think, where has that time gone? And it's basically about things that human beings do, and we are human. We have things where, a lot of psychology talks about conscious mind, subconscious mind, and you probably would have heard the phrase before, you need to be more safety conscious. And we use these words, but then people say, well, actually, is the conscious mind? What is the subconscious, or the creative subconscious, or the unconscious mind? People refer to it in different, some people say the subconscious, some people say the unconscious mind, but they refer to all this stuff. And psychology just breaks it down. It really makes it, doesn't have to be as complex as what people make out psychology is. It's built up of people switching off, people getting complacent. Basically, like when you can drive a vehicle, why you don't have to be in control of it, because you've been driving for 10, 20 years and you're comfortable with that. And that's what happens to people on site. They're comfortable with their job. I was comfortable with my job. I could have done that job in my sleep if I wanted to. I could have done it blindfolded. And what happens up here is when we feel something is now a part of our routine and it's not a risk anymore, we'll throw it into our subconscious mind. And we don't see it. We don't see a risk. We don't see a danger. We just go through the motions of doing it and doing it and doing it. So psychology was fascinating for me because it looked at how human beings are time-saving machines, and ultimately, a lot of companies can have systems, procedures, method statements, risk assessment. You can give them all the PPE in the world. You can give them all the training in the world. But I felt that that doesn't keep people safe. At the end of the day, people keep people safe. And psychology is understanding people, understanding your people and your business and your organization. What makes them tick. How well do you know them? For a start, it looks at we're highly, emotionally driven creatures, and we are driven by our feelings and emotions. But do you know what's going on in someone's head at work? Do you know if there's something going on at home? Do you know if there's something in the back burner that's got them completely confused up here, or they're logged on at something at home? And then it's about build, like you said, communication as well. How well do you communicate with your team? Do you know them? Do you not know them?
And is there anything like, I think something you said there just kind of like made me think about how well you know your guys on site, and often I find that most of the guys that are drawn to working on site, they're not they're not a certain type of learner that likes like reading stuff.
No.
But then I even remember when I was going through kind of, my company getting compliant with HSE, it's all like paper, right? It's just like sign this, read this, like, and I think there must be something in that as well. And I wonder whether your studies kind of tie into that, of what you're learning maybe about how certain people interpret instructions or learning. And, if we could learn to understand our guys more, then we could perhaps give them the information and the input that they're a lot more likely to absorb.
So you got three sort of learning styles technically. You've got people who are very visual, you've got people who are very auditory, and you have people who are very kinesthetic. So kinesthetic is like touch, feel. Most people in construction are kinesthetic. They like to fix something, they like to build something, they like to use your hands. They're not very auditory and they're not very visual. I'm not saying all, but most of people in construction go into construction because they love working with their hands. But if you're going to cater, let's say you're doing a toolbox talk in the morning, and you're going to get them to listen to the toolbox talks that you've read, and then get them to sign it to say they've read it, they've understood it, and they're going to go out there now and implement it, well, then you're not, because they're not going to cater to it. And some of psychology to help us embed for people who aren't very, auditory or visual, is to reinforce it, is to keep going over it, ask questions after it, maybe question them and say, right, what did you just listen, or what did you hear? Oh, this. Okay, but did you hear the part about this? Go over it again. We get pushed for time, don't we? So it's like, right, quickly get this toolbox talk out the way, get it done, get back to work. But we never seem to really embed it, do we? We just tell them what they need to do. So my advice to a lot of people is to go out back on site and re-embed it, re-go over it, take the toolbox back out there, have a quick chat with them on site while they're working. Do you remember the toolbox talk this morning? Yeah. What was in it? What was it about? Oh, I remember this bit, I remember that bit. And it's just getting to the habit of reinforcing stuff, because this is where a lot of companies fall down. Right, listen to this, lads or lasses. Off you go. And so, we're humans.
Just to make sure I understood that correctly, you're saying that most of the guys or the ladies on site level are kinesthetic learners, but the method of perhaps in the context of a toolbox talk to the best method to give them that information is just asking questions, because there isn't sort of necessarily a physical way to get them to learn something unless there's like a show and tell demonstration.
Exactly. But trying to get someone to learn, a style that isn't you. It's not impossible. It can be done, but it's also a very hard task. And again, it's that time frame. So it's getting constructive feedback as well. Get feedback from it. Don't just deliver it, but get the feedback, because you'll then know what they took in out of it, what landed, what didn't land, sort of thing. I used to sometimes get. Now, what people also have to remember is this alpha state that we talked about, where you can drive from A to B, or you can zone out. People can do that to your voice. Now, if you're the person who has to give that toolbox talk every day, they'll just zone out. So what I used to do is get someone different to read it in the group. I'd say, right, who's reading it this morning? Or I'd give it to that person and say, you read it. And it's just a little technique that it's nothing overcomplicated. It's just a different voice. But what happens is when you see someone out of their comfort zone, let's just say someone's not great at speaking in front of people, if they're now delivering a toolbox talk or risk assessment or method statement, whatever it may be, they've got their attention span's a little bit better because, he doesn't like doing this, he's never done this before, and they're listening to him or her. And again, it's just a little technique to switch it up. Don't be the one to always just read it out. Get somebody else to read it. So there's little just techniques, little tips to, follow it up.
Yeah.
The repetition is huge, and the media, the television people, advertising, they nailed it, didn't they? There's an old saying, if I said to you now, a Mars a day will help you work, rest and play. And I say to them, well, how do you know that song? They're like, we heard it a million times before. So all you have to do is try and reinforce it and just use a bit more of a repetition-based thing. It will go in.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't have to. You just can't do one thing once and expect people to change habits, ways they've always worked. So
I want to, on the sort of psychology side, delve a little bit into kind of, I want to call it I guess it's like masculine ego, because we're obviously in a very, male-driven industry. Especially when we're talking about, at a site level.
Yeah.
I don't know in your particular situation, and feel free to share if you agree or disagree. But again, from personal experience, I know that there's almost a masculine energy around how many bags you can put on your shoulder, how many people needed to lift that piece of steel, and I guess it's often perceived as being more masculine to do something without PPE. Then, I don't need a hat or something like that.
Yeah.
And have you found, through delving into a little bit of the psychology, where that comes from, and what could potentially be done within the culture of a company to I don't want to say dispel that, because personally I'm a believer that there's nothing wrong with masculinity. If anything, you should embrace masculinity.
Yeah.
But it's how do we maintain that, but also have an environment where we're not, wrecking our faces, or we're not coming up to nearly dying and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I look back at my apprentice, my labourer at 19. I look back at maybe how I acted towards him, because he knew what I was doing was wrong, and he knew what I was doing was silly, and he was like, I knew it, but I just couldn't challenge her. And I look back and think, why? Was that because of me on site? Maybe giving him not such a hard time, because there's always going to be the banter. There's always going to be the chain of command, team leader, apprentice, labourer. But I feel, did I take it too far? Have I made that young man believe that he cannot challenge safety in fear that I'd probably turn around and say to him, who are you to tell me to put my goggles on? Who are you to tell me, after doing it for so many years, to put my hard hat on? Who are you to tell me? That must have been built up over a year or so period, because he wouldn't have just gone, I can't, I can challenge Justin. He's always made me feel like I can always speak up and question him. And it's this banter. It's this banter that sometimes we have taken it too far, maybe, and I've obviously made him feel he is not to speak up to me. He is not to question me, and he is not to challenge me. And that is something, again, maybe I learned over years of working with people who have made me feel, when I became a team leader, maybe it's my turn to now come down on the apprentice. Do you know what I mean? And it's like you said, it's that banter. Have we created this culture where our banter on site unconsciously is making a lot of people feel, can't challenge him. I can't speak up, and I can't question my ganger, my manager, whatever. because they feel in fear of they're going to get ridiculed, they're going to get ripped to shreds by me or by the next person who they challenge, And I think that is psychological safety there. That is behavioral safety. It's psychology. It's what I have done to someone else in a sense that I've made them feel that they can't challenge or question me.
And do you think that this is again something that comes from like a top-down perspective of the management being responsible for creating a space where people can talk and challenge each other, or do you think this is more of a let's say like training your guys to feel slightly different about themselves and slightly different about what it is to challenge someone and whether that is okay and how to do it in certain language and stuff like that? What do you think the solution to that could be?
I think the communication is the key to all of it. Like managers, now we communicate with our tone, so the tone we use to speak to people. We communicate with our words, so we choose the words that we want to say, but we also have body language. And when these don't all line up, you're sending complete mixed messages across your business in terms of safety. And an example of what I'm talking about is if and I've had this before and I've seen it. I've gone into an office and my manager's been sat there and he's typing an email and he's typing away, I've got a problem on site or need something. And you know what? He's saying all the right words to me. He's telling me, Justin, whatever you need, I'll get it, I'll buy it, I'll back you. You've got my authority. Go to the stores. If they ain't got it, come back and tell me, and I'll make sure they go and get it for you. But the whole time he's looking at his screen and he's still typing away. Now, body language is probably one of the biggest part of our communications that we don't actually understand. Even though he said all the right words to me, his body language screamed to me, I don't care. I'm not bothered. Even though he said everything right, his body language. So obviously with communication, I remember an incident where I went into my manager's office and had a problem on site, needed some fittings, needed to get a load of stuff delivered to site, all this sort of stuff. And we had quite a tight time frame. So I went in and spoke to him and he was writing an email or replying to an email. And he said all the right things to me. He was telling me to go to the stores, get the fittings. If they haven't got them, order it from here. If they haven't got them, you make sure you let them know that I've said that you can get these done ASAP. And do you know what? He said everything right. Everything I wanted to hear, he said. The only problem is he didn't look up from his screen when he's saying the whole thing. All I took away from that conversation was, you don't care. As much as you said everything right and that I wanted to hear, his body language didn't match the words. And that's what they call incongruence, is when something doesn't match, when your tone, your body language, the words, when they don't match, basically you're sending mixed signals to people. That's the problem I think we do see a lot in, not just in construction, but in a lot of companies where people think they can just tell you what you want to hear. But we can read people's body language massively. And if that doesn't match the words you're saying, you're saying you don't care. And it's hard because it's just, you've got to give people that attention. You've got to give them full, look at them and tell them what they want to hear, because we will pick up on what you're actually telling me without actually saying it. They will pick up on it, and again, it's just communication. I'd play one of the biggest parts of any organization, any company, is getting that communication right, up and down, from them to bottom, top to down. Communication's got to be bang on.
And with because even from personal experience, I remember there's often a bit of a battle, I guess, from management or as an owner, where you feel like one or two individuals can really make it hard to implement a culture of safety in your business. And sometimes it can be very easy and quick to blame, like, it's just that person, like he just isn't interested. But then after just listening to what you're saying, it makes me think, okay, well, what signals was I giving? Like, did it come across that I was actually interested and I genuinely wanted to know? So I guess my question off that is, like, how do you see it in terms of, like, where do you draw the line of like, stop trying to convince a certain person around embedding health and safety and trying to find different ways to make it click, and just say, okay, it's either, you've got to do it or you've got to leave our company because it's the way we do it. Because I'd imagine in all your talks, you probably get a lot of people objecting and saying, oh, this and that. So you must have it yourself, even when you're trying to present a certain topic. And I'm curious how you deal with that, and what you found is the best method.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll never sit here and say I've got it all figured out. I'll never sit here and say I've got it, because some people might not even, whatever I might say, completely disagree with. But that's what I love. I love being challenged. I love being able to have a debate. And like you said, for me, there's going to be different criterias we're facing with. Everyone is different. Not one individual will be exactly the same. But as a great manager or as a great leader, try to use other little techniques. So, policing method, okay? There is a time and a place where you will have to come down on someone like a ton of bricks. There will be a time and a place where you will have to pull their contract. If they say, oh, I don't get paid to do that, or that's not my job, I don't get paid, you'll have to say, you know what, let's look at your contract. Let's see what it states, what your job is or isn't. It may be a training issue. So it may be a case that they just weren't trained. They weren't competent. Maybe they didn't know what they was doing was unsafe. Maybe just the way they were trained. So it's up to you to go, maybe this is a training issue. Could they be advised? Was it a bit of advice they needed from you where, do you know what, it's probably best if we do it this way, or that wasn't, a way? Could you mentor someone? Could you coach someone? Is this a case where they don't need mentoring, they need a bit of coaching? They don't need policing, they need a bit of coaching. So it's using different styles of engagement as a manager and as a leader to try and surf that rainbow of, like, policing's one end and coaching's all the way over here, and come up with a way of, how can I get the best out of this person without just saying, you're rubbish, or you're not safe, you're not doing it this way, and try and look at other techniques that you could use to coach, mentor, train, advise, and surf that rainbow, because each individual will be different. Not one person will have a style that you're going to approach it with. So I guess it's sometimes some people just, you've got to let them go, and it's hard as a manager, as a leader, to say, right, we're going to take you off the contract, or we're going to have to let you go. But then that takes a lot for a manager to have to make that call. But at the end of the day, this is your business, it's your company. And if you don't feel they're safe, then you have to make that hard call to say, on here, we just don't do that. This is the culture I'm building.
So there's kind of a couple of themes there. The one theme that seems to have been overarching on this whole conversation, which is there isn't a one-size-fits-all way of working and communicating with everybody, and it's acknowledging that and having that flexible approach, but also this idea of leading from the top, and your actions speak louder than words, and actually in some cases making a decision to let a person go, even though they might be the quickest, the most efficient, but they're refusing to kind of embrace the safety culture that you're trying to roll out, can actually filter down to others and say, okay, this is, this actually maybe is a number one priority.
And there's that shadow, isn't there, that the leader casts over an organization. And I sometimes call it the shadow of the leader. What shadow do you cast over your company? If you've got a client who comes to you and is giving you a time frame that you maybe feel isn't probably achievable, or maybe it's, it's a bit out there, and you go to your team and say, right, this is the task they've given us. This is what we need to try and get done within that time frame. Basically, the shadow you cast is, this is what we have to do. If you turned around to that client and said, no way, that is not a feasible, that is unsafe, we won't hit that time frame, the message you've just sent to everybody is, you care. You don't care about falling out with a client, not falling out with a client, but you don't mind having that difficult conversation with a client. You're not going to run back to the team and say, right, this is what they've given us to do, this is what they're saying they want us to do. They look at you, who's took that stand against him, and gone, no, I'm not telling my lads to, then that's unrealistic. That's an unsafe time frame you give us to get this work done. what you've done is just shown that the shadow that you've now casted over your company is he cares about us. He is literally on our side because he took a stand against a client and he's shown us that he cares. And he hasn't just ran back and gone, right, this is what they want us to do now. Do you see what I mean? So again, you play a massive part. The manager role, the CEO, director, whatever level you are, you play a huge part, and your actions will speak volumes to the ones on the ground. Sometimes without even realizing you've said anything.
I like that.
You know?
I really like this kind of shadow you're casting over your company, because it also applies to so many other areas as well. But it's and these all intertwine as well. They all intertwine. You know, it's not health and safety and welfare is not just this like one kind of siloed thing. It overlaps in so much stuff. This was a really, really interesting conversation, Justin. We went in pretty deep, especially on the psychology stuff, which I think is super interesting.
Down rabbit holes with this sort of stuff. It's
yeah, I think you could, and we've got to keep an eye on the time. In terms of your focus with the subject matter of the talks with Titanium Talks that you're doing, like I know you kind of, as a business, you cover the safety aspect, the mental health aspect, but also some coaching as well, and leadership. But is there a particular area that you're kind of more focused on, or is it is it kind of all areas mentioned?
I get blown in different directions all the time, and I'll get a company say they want some performance coaching for managers, supervisors. And I love doing that. I love being able to build people's self-esteem. I love being able to create something where they can leave one of my sessions and feel good about themselves. I love it when I go and do a behavioural day as well. And again, you say the word behaviour, that's got a psychological impact on people. If they're coming in for behavioural safety training, the first thing they go is, what have I done wrong? Because I will try and stay away from the word behavioural now, because of the fact that you mention the word behaviour and people think straight away it's negative, I could say, let's talk about your behaviour. Now, I haven't said good or bad, but 9 times out of 10 people go, great, it's negative. So I love being able to go and do a behavioural day and just change people's minds around the word behaviour. I love talking about the accident. I would say I love it. The impact it has is great. The impact, when I get messages galore, when I was in Dublin last week, I've already had no end of people text me, taking the time out of their day to message me to say, do you know what, I went home that day and I thought about my family, and I thought about what I sometimes let myself get wrapped up in work and the pressures of work. And they said, it's just simple. Think of your family. Because I guarantee if you do, if you think of your family, the next time you're going to do something silly or you think something's unsafe or it's not right, if you just thought of your family, then you'd make the right decision. Because ultimately, everybody has the right to come to work in one piece, and everybody has the right to go home in one piece. But we have to do it together. We've got to work as a team. We've got to work as a unit, because individually you can't achieve it. You've all got to be on that same page. But again, it's like we've talked about, it's embedding that culture in your organization that we are all on the same page. So I love doing the talks as well. It's incredible. It's an incredible journey I've been on for the past 9 years. It's been a long journey, but it's an interesting one now. It's taken me into a world of, I can be me and talk about my experiences in construction, and I can talk about the accident now. I can talk about what I've learned from it, and I'll try to turn it into a positive and do the best I can with companies I go and see, because I want to try and create high-performing companies, basically, and a high-performing team, but safe.
Yeah, it's a great thing that you are finding your own self, I guess, benefit in sharing your story. But I'm sure you hear it all the time. It is impactful when you hear it, and everybody takes something different from it. But even I didn't even want to touch on it because I think I would find it hard to talk about. But even that situation of you taking 25 minutes to talk to your children before your surgery, it's just like, I just putting myself in that situation. So we will put the link to Titanium Talks on the show notes. So if anybody is listening and does want to have Justin come out and talk to the team, then I would highly recommend it, just off the base of this conversation. And I'm sure the team from Titanium can take it from there. So cool, Justin. Thanks a lot for having or for joining. And I hope your first podcast wasn't
No, I enjoyed it.
Too
Thank you so
nerve-wracking.
much
Yeah,
for getting to have me to come on. You know, it's been an absolute privilege. I really enjoyed it. I really loved
yeah,
talking, and that's all it was, which is it's a chat, isn't it? And it's
yeah.
nothing too further the top. So thank you so much.